Hello, dear consciousness researchers. Welcome to the Matrixes with Jonathan and Shiva. Today we have another extremely exciting video for you, one that you have certainly never heard before. We are consciousness researchers. We deal with astral travel, lucid dreaming, spirituality in general, expansion of consciousness, and of course spiritual dissociation. Yes, what actually makes our video special is that we never just talk about theory or hearsay, but rather just about the topics that we have both actually experienced and experienced ourselves. If one of us hasn't experienced it, we don't talk about it, not in our videos, but really if we have experienced it, then we make a video. And yes, we don't get our knowledge from books, but really about spiritual dissociation, meditation, pineal flash, dreams, astral travel. Then I would say, let's really get into this extremely exciting video, this really very exciting topic. We've both experienced that too.
Through spiritual dissociation, one can also recognize or will recognize that one's thoughts influence one's perception. So you create reality based on your thoughts, your feelings, your expectations, beliefs, opinions, and so on. We have always recommended practicing spiritual dissociation in order to be able to influence the shaping of personal reality. We are actually all creators, creator beings who, through their personal programming, are for us the comprehensive word for the creation of reality through thoughts, beliefs, feelings, expectations, and so on.
Umfassende Wort für das Erschaffen der Realität durch Gedanken, Überzeugung, Gefühle, Erwartungen und so weiter.
And this programming can also look very individual. For example, what impression a black dog makes on you. For example, one person would describe a black dog in a dream as negative.
Für einen Eindruck auf einen macht. Die eine Person würde zum Beispiel in einem Traum einen schwarzen Hund als negativ beschreiben.
He's black, he's big, he looks menacing. Yes, that is a bad symbol for me. Or when you go for a walk in the forest and suddenly you come face to face with a large black dog.
Oder wenn man im Wald spazieren geht und steht plötzlich einem schwarzen großen Hund gegenüber.
In such a case, everyone would react differently. One runs away, the other throws the stone at him, the other tries to communicate with him, the other gives him a sausage. Very different, and a person who is very fond of dogs, for example, would not negatively interpret, for example, a black dog in a dream. He would then think, oh, I dreamed of a dog, how nice, maybe I'll get a dog soon, or maybe I'll take care of a black dog soon and he'll be happy. So using this example with the black dog, you can see that every person is programmed differently in their own way. And this programming is part of the life experience you have had. And so as soon as an experience in our present comes into our lives, a personal experience, we of course always try to evaluate, assess and analyze this.
Versuchen wir diese Erfahrung natürlich immer zu bewerten, einzuschätzen.
Experience. And in this context we access our life experience, that is our memory. And every memory we have is actually an electromagnetic link in our brain.
Jede Erinnerung, die wir haben, ist eigentlich eine elektromagnetische Verknüpfung in unserem Gehirn.
Ultimately, it's nothing more, because no one can say with 100% certainty that all the experiences a person has had in their life really happened. We often tend to reinterpret past experiences over the years. Or we tend to modify this memory without even consciously noticing it.
ohne dass es uns selbst so richtig bewusst auffällt.
Yes, that wasn't really anything new. You already know this. We have already made videos about it, about personal reality and the shaping of personal reality. But what's this about the shock of the universe? And now there was the start. So you had an experience. That was a few years ago. I also had an experience about 5 years ago. And then 3 or 4 days ago you had a pineal flash. You have to say the two experiences a few years ago, it was clear to us what we had experienced. And it was also clear what that meant overall. But it was only through this little pineal flash that all the pieces of the puzzle came together for both of us. All three experiences we had were necessary to solve the puzzle. So just his experience and the flash might not have been enough. Just mine and his flash wouldn't have been enough. There were really three phases that had to happen in order to gain this really profound and actually very shocking insight. And here you can see again that time is not linear. We have already explained it in 1 or 2 videos, or at least suggested that time does not run linearly, but that events take place in sections. That means his experience many, many years ago, my experience 5 years ago, and the pineal flash actually happened one after the other. It was a section. You may not recognize it at first glance because there are many years in between, but the truth is that we experienced everything in a row and then received the insight and solved the puzzle. Yes, it's difficult to imagine, but maybe it comes across telepathically what we mean exactly. Or would you like to explain it in more detail with the sections?
First of all, we have to explain what pineal meat is, because many viewers think, pineal meat, what is that supposed to be? And a piece of pineal gland flesh is therefore called flash, i.e. from lightning. That means he only appears for a second. Maybe some people experience a pineal flash for 3 seconds, 5 seconds, and others only for a fraction of a second. This means that pineal flash is a very short yes. Release of DMT from the pineal gland. This is a mini little bit that can be ejected or poured out.
Das ist ein kleines bisschen, das da ausgestoßen werden kann, beziehungsweise ausgeschüttet.
And at that moment you suddenly have a realization. Suddenly it just clicks into your head. In normal everyday language you would say, I had a brilliant idea today, or I had a bright moment, or something like that.
Oder ich hatte einen hellen Moment oder sowas in der Art.
But you shouldn't see it in such a simplified way. With pineal flashes, it's the case that not only one piece of information comes in, it's like this piece of information is like a big package, and there are lots of little packages in it. That means it's a piece of information with thousands of pieces of information in it, pictures and everything else you can imagine. So you are not only given information, something like you are in cryocapsules, but also where are the cryocapsules, how big are the cryocapsules, what do the cryocapsules look like? And then there are pictures. How do I look in there? All sorts of information. And there are hundreds or thousands of them in there that you get all at once. Of course, you can't save or remember them all at once, but you can take in the feeling that lies behind all the information very intensively, and then take some of the information apart and then discuss it separately, perceive. It, so to speak.
So a pineal flash can be so short that you only get one piece of information, or it can also be that you get one piece of information and then another 100 come after it. The length of the pineal flash varies greatly, but of course the longer it lasts, the more information reaches consciousness.
It's like a zip file, so now...
A zip file?
If you open the zip file, there may be 100 additional files in there. Well, that's exactly what a Zebeldrison bottle is.
Right, that's true. Compressed knowledge, and sometimes there is only one file in a zip file. And then you think, why was it zipped in the first place? Yes, that's right, yes. And because of this, each of us is a creator being. And the difference here is that we are, of course, creator beings with amnesia. That is, we do not remember that we are creator beings. And because we don't remember it, we aren't really aware that we have our personal reality. Personal reality only means the reality that we directly perceive. So if Putin says, yes, last night I rode my bike and then met Joe Biden and we chatted, then that is not your personal reality at that moment, because
Joe Biden getroffen und wir haben uns gekloppt. Ne? Dann ist das nicht deine persönliche Realität. Weil du warst
you weren't there, you read it somewhere, period. So what you read or hear or what you see in films and so on does not belong to your personal reality.
Gehört nicht zu deiner persönlichen Realität.
Your personal reality only includes what you experience directly when you are there in a film or in a scene.
In einem Film, ne, oder in einer Szene.
That's just personal reality. And each of us shapes our personal reality individually. And as I said, one gives the black dog a sausage and the other runs away because he is afraid of the dog.
Dem schwarzen Hund eine Wurst und der andere läuft weg, weil Angst vor dem Hund hat.
This means that based on our life experience, we have the corresponding reality. Or, to perhaps put it differently, we have made a choice of reality from various reality options. Because in every situation that comes our way, we choose. I once saw a great picture of a woman standing in the bedroom and seeing her husband lying in bed with another woman. And then you could see her thought bubble on the right, and then everything was there, all the options. I'm doing the scene now. I'm throwing both of them out. I'm just throwing the woman out. I'm just throwing the man out. I'll go with it. So those were the options the woman had at that moment. And we as creator beings then choose one of these options. And what we choose is our creation because we experience it in that moment. Yes, and pineal gland meat, yes, exactly. Recently I had one of those pineal flesh problems again, and then suddenly had the realization of what happens when a person recognizes 100% that they are a creator being.
Was geschieht, wenn ein Mensch zu 100% erkennt, dass ein Schöpferwesen ist?
Exactly. And that's what we call the shock of the universe.
Because I think it was the biggest shock. It was pretty much the scariest thing you could imagine. And we don't mean that there are ghosts running around, scary. It also really makes you, yes, I would call it high German shit anxiety. Maybe we want to tell our experiences first and then put it into a conclusion. Or maybe we start again with your experience from back then. Yes, because you were the first part of the section, so to speak.
Someone who is very advanced in spiritual dissociation will, at some point, which can take weeks, months, years, decades, very differently, come to a state in which they realize that they feel surrounded by a kind of bubble, or rather, this bubble also sees, we called this bubble the matrix shell. This means that each of us is in a matrix shell in which we perceive our reality. It's actually like a one-man cinema, where you sit inside and the screen is just the inner wall of this bubble. And that's where we perceive our world. So that means that as we sit here making this video for you, Shiva is in her bubble and I am in my bubble.
Befindet sich Shiva in ihrer Blase und ich mich in meiner Blase.
And a creator being should also learn how to create it. And that's one of the reasons why you're in such a bubble.
Und das ist einer der Gründe, warum man sich eben in einer solchen Blase befindet.
And in my earlier experience, I often noticed this bubble, this matrix shell, the personal matrix shell. And in that I found myself in this bubble, and I also saw that I was sitting in it, and that I had, so to speak, projected my creations onto the inner wall of the bubble.
Auf die Innenwand der Blase projiziert habe.
But I also experienced a state where everything was black. At that moment, the whole bubble became transparent and no reality film was played anymore. And at that moment, everything was black.
Und in dem Moment war alles schwarz.
Absolute blackness, you could say. There wasn't a little light there. And when I noticed it for the first time, I literally shit my pants.
Als ich das erste Mal wahrgenommen habe, habe ich mich förmlich in die Hosen gemacht.
Because that was so frightening, so scary, that I just realized that my reality, everything that I have been creating for decades, can disappear with a snap of my fingers, can be deactivated. And then you sit all alone in your matrix shell and only see this pain. And that is a very memorable and also a very impressive moment when someone who is training spiritual dissociation comes to this state. So we know a lot of people who train this, but so far I only know very few who have really gotten to the point where they can perceive this matrix shell. Yes?
My experience.
How was your experience, Shiva? You noticed something similar.
Exactly. I've only seen our two cases.
So mine too?
In the black. That was from the outside, but then I switched in, so to speak, and perceived the story from the inside, within myself. And like in the never-ending story, it is absolute nothing. It was like in the never-ending story where you create fantasia. This is our personal reality. And when you stop creating, nothingness comes. Absolute nothingness, which is absolute blackness and absolute silence. It's so quiet, you can't compare it to absolute silence in 3D. We have had absolute silence here on Earth, namely in Nevada, in the desert. You didn't hear a bird or anything, it was absolutely silent, but this is a kind of other silence, a deep inner silence. And it scared the hell out of me at the time. I was so scared because I was completely alone. 100%, there is no one. The entire planet is empty, so to speak. There is no environment. There are no sounds. There is no reality. There is simply nothing at all. And I then realized that no matter what I create, I only create it so that I realize that I create everything. And I also realized that I deliberately beamed myself here to forget who I am so that I can learn to recognize who I really am and that I am the 100% creator of this reality. And when I stop creating, there is absolutely nothing. And the perception that it's obviously very scary, and scary is of course our filters, of course our ego filters. Because in reality there is something there. When you get out of the cocoons, there's a huge fucking reality. When I looked through the cocoon, I also saw creatures, at least one, that was walking along and watching over the cocoons, so to speak, or over us. So There is something out there, but we perceive it as absolute blackness and silence. And for me, it was an extreme shock to realize the whole thing and suddenly be in this nothingness, in this absolute nothingness. The shock of the universe, because the entire universe no longer exists from one second to the next. In your personal reality, neither the sun, nor the stars, nor the galaxies exists, not the earth, not even Jonathan, nobody. You're completely alone, and that was pretty hard at that moment.
Yes, absolutely. So when you find out about it, your hair really stands on end, I can only assure you. And that's just the shock of the universe. Actually, it is also the shock of the Creator's soul.
Yeah, right.
Because the Creator's soul recognizes at some point on the path of its development, and every one of us gets there at some point, maybe in 20 lives, in 50 lives, or in the next life, maybe even in this life, that you become aware of this matrix shell. And when you then realizes that you have simply created everything, created it yourself, then comes the shock of the universe. Because what's the shock? The shock is that the moment the Creator being realizes that it created everything itself, it no longer creates anything. This is the shock of the universe. This means that the Creator being can no longer create anything at this moment because it recognizes that it created everything 100% itself. Every person, every object, whatever. The world, nature, everything. And this shock that hits the Creator soul at that very moment actually puts it in the highest state of dissociation, you could say. This is the highest state of dissociation.
The end point, right?
Yes, actually the end point, because at that moment, due to the shock of the universe, he can no longer create and doesn't want to.
No, it doesn't make any sense at that moment, right?
Yeah, right. There's no point in trying to create anything at that moment when you suddenly realize, I created it all myself.
Everything?
Everything I've experienced here, yes, many people sometimes ask themselves, yes, I'm here in the 3D matrix, and why have I forgotten everything? Why do I have amnesia? The forgetting machine we've been reporting on, amnesia, and of course our inability to even remember our previous lives. All of this information is somehow not at all accessible to most people. And at another point, if we of course say that everyone creates their own world, the way they perceive it, then one naturally asks oneself, yes, why do I then create the amnesia? Or rather, why do I say yes to a world in which oblivion machines exist? In which you have amnesia, in which you have absolutely no idea who you really are, where you really came from, what your previous lives were, and so on, and has no access to his true inner knowledge. And that is the point that explains why we have agreed to forgetting. Namely through the shock of the universe.
And that's why we wanted to forget everything, so that we could experience that we really are creators. And sure, we then went to different levels of consciousness, 5D, 3D. And in 3D, of course, we created ourselves. It's not just that we wanted to forget ourselves. It happens on a completely different level of consciousness. Here, of course, we have created ourselves so that we also get amnesia for all the lives we have ever had. What was on 5D, what incarnations we had before through the oblivion machine. So there are, so to speak, two levels of consciousness of amnesia. One that is triggered by technology, one that is digital, and one that is self-created and desired. Oblivion from the highest level, so to speak, in order to experience ourselves as creators. But that no longer makes sense once we realize that. Yes, the shock of the universe. The experiences somehow sound pretty banal when you tell them. But when you had the Pioneer Flash, we probably spent another 2 hours intensively going through the experiences and getting halfway into that state again. And even if it sounds really banal when you tell it in the video, it was really one of the most formative insights, experiences that we have had in our entire careers as humans. Logically too, because if you are truly 100% creator, 100%, and then you realize this is just phenomenal. You can't really put it into words, not really. That's actually difficult.
Yes, definitely. This circumstance is, of course, also related to why we ultimately decided on a 3D matrix or a 5D matrix or 6D matrix or whatever. Why we entered the free matrix, why we even go so far. Let us even go down into the 3D matrix. You can also see that there are cross connections and that we decided to do this from a higher perspective. And of course, within the 3D matrix here in our everyday world, we naturally also ask ourselves questions. Why did I create this? I don't feel like it at all. What was that supposed to mean now?
Well, that's the trick, right?
Yes?
No matter how badly you create something, you really do it 100% only so that at some point you realize who you are, or that you are actually 100% the creator, that you are alone and that there is no one there to do anything for you, can create you, nothing at all, no one, never, ever.
Well, and that is, of course, the reason for this learning experience, that this matrix shell exists for everyone, because the highest level of knowledge lies in the matrix shell. And once you have achieved that, you can leave the matrix, any matrix. This means that the 3D matrix and the free matrix can be exited via this matrix shell. From a higher perspective, it is, so to speak, the be-all and end-all of the creator or the creator. To be. You can really imagine it like a chick in an egg. When the chick has matured, it can break open the egg and enter the new world.
The new world is not like the old world, because here in our world, as I said, we are all sitting in our own eggs. Everyone creates their own subjective reality, but when we leave the matrix shell, we come into the true reality, which is so gigantic, and it is objective. There is no subjective creation of each individual. It's somehow different. I can't even put it into words. In any case, it's a kind of community creation there. That's what I would call it. So, objectively anyway.
This means that when we recognize ourselves as the absolute creator of all perceived elements, the shock of the universe comes. Everything goes black. Because at that moment, we no longer create and no longer have any thoughts, which of course are always the basis in the 3D matrix for a creator being. And we would actually be able to leave this matrix shell after we have fully realized that we are the true creators, or that everyone is their own creator in their matrix shell. And then leaving this, you also leave. The entire digital matrix, i.e. 5D and 3D matrix, free matrix, and the earth matrix. And when we leave it, doesn't it remind us of something? Because if you now relate this to our present, to transhumanism, for example, transhumanism actually plans to digitize the consciousness of all people. Like in the Spielberg film here, Ready Player One, this has already shown us very well where everything is going with transhumanism. And it's also about bringing everyone into a digital matrix.
eine digitale Matrix zu bringen. Das heißt,
This means that in the 3D matrix, an attempt is actually made to imitate this again.
das nochmal nachzumachen,
Das macht's nochmal richtig schlimm.
That makes it even worse.
nochmal nachzumachen,
To do it again in order to do the same thing that has already happened and is still happening on a large scale in the universe, in the digital matrix.
abgelaufen ist und immer noch abläuft. Also eine Matrix.
So a matrix within the matrix within the matrix.
Ja, und so geht das dann immer weiter.
And so it goes on, because at some point you will definitely build into a matrix again within this transhumanistic matrix.
Stunde wieder irgendeine Matrix bauen.
Ja.
Und da
And here we also recommend the film World on a Wire, a very old ham. I think from that, I don't know when it's from 60s, 70s or something like that, or 80s something, so it's very old. He's already
alt, der ist schon 40, 50 Jahre alt.
40. The film is 50 years old, but we would recommend taking a look. It shows it very well.
Ja, das ist der Schock des
Yes, this is the shock of the universe. What else do you have to say about that?
I hope you all aren't too shocked now. Yes, if you find yourself in a state like that, if you ever get into this state, which is really extremely shocking and can last for months, like it does with us.
Gerne Monate nachhallen kann, wie bei uns. Schreibt uns.
Just write to us. Write to us if you don't know what to do or need help, or if you somehow, I don't know, can't really handle it.
Umgehen könnt, schreibt uns. Wir sind dabei
Write us. We both went through it. It took months, but maybe it will work for you. Can we accompany you there?
begleiten.
Ja, also der Schock des
Yes, the shock of the universe is a blast, and is, of course, I would assume, the last milestone as far as the digital matrix and the whole matrix nonsense is concerned.
was die digitale Matrix und das ganze Matrix-Gedöns überhaupt betrifft. Und dass das wirklich so, dass
And that this really is the end goal of a human being or a creator soul who is planning to leave the matrix.
Schöpferseele, die eben plant, die Matrix zu verlassen. Und letzten Endes
And ultimately, each of us will have to get to that point. There's nothing else left. Just like every person who dies in the 3D matrix eventually switches to their astral body.
stirbt in der 3D-Matrix, irgendwann in seinen Astralkörper wechselt. Das ist genauso. Das ist
It is exactly like that. This is also one of those milestones that will happen to everyone. And it's the same with the matrix shell,
mit der Matrixhülle genauso. Nur, dass das mit der Matrix
except that this is, of course, much more difficult to achieve with the matrix shell. And that can only be done through spiritual dissociation. There is no other way.
und
And due to this, it is not as easy to achieve as, for example, an out-of-body experience. Even if we don't say it would be very, very easy.
sehr, sehr leicht. Da muss man auch schon trainieren.
You also have to train.
Ja, ihr Lieben.
Yes, dear ones, the shock of the universe, and we say goodbye until next week.
Und
Ciao.
wir verabschieden uns. Bis nächste Woche. Ciao.
Ciao.
Ciao.